Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to welcome you to the 8th Annual International Conference of the Research Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics in collaboration with Leuven University, under the title Key Classical Works on Islamic Ethics. This year's international conference is special, as we are hosting it virtually for the first time with the rest of the world, due to the current situation of COVID-19, as your safety is our number one priority. With that being said, please enjoy this unique experience and share your thoughts on our social media using the hashtag CILE2020. Also, if you are interested to have a look at our previous conferences, you are very welcome to visit our website, cilecenter.org. I would like to remind you that translation and interpretation is available to all of you. All you have to do is open the link that I'm going to share now with you on the chat and pick your channel, whether it's Arabic or English, while watching the participants on WebEx. I would like to also ask you to please turn off your mics if you are not speaking next. And if you are speaking, kindly open your camera so we can screenshot a group photo. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A section. The moderator will see your reactions questions in real time, and you will have answers to your questions right behind your computer, tablet, or phone, wherever you are in the world. Moving forward to the opening session, it's now my great pleasure to introduce the moderator, Dr. Ray Juredini, who is a professor of migration ethics and human rights at the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. His human and labor rights-based scholarship and activism centers on forced labor, human trafficking, labor recruitment, and migrant labor reform advocacy. His latest edited book in 2020, with Saeed Hassan, is Migration and Islamic Ethics, published by Brill. Dr. Ray, the floor is yours.
Oh, can you hear me now? Yes, thank you. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Rowan, for the introduction. I've been with CILE since 2014 as a research professor on migration, human rights, and Islamic ethics. My role now is as the moderator in this first session and to introduce Dr. Emad Shahin and Dr. Mu'taz Al-Khatib for the opening session. The first speaker is Dr. Emad Shaheen, who is the director of CILE, the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies, and the interim provost of Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. It's an honor and a pleasure to have him as a sensitive and thoughtful leader in our research center and in the university generally, and someone who, despite his incredibly busy administrative schedule, always finds the time to attend conferences and seminars throughout the year to keep up to date and to engage with the Islamic intellectual discussions of the day. Before joining CIS, he was the Hasib Sabah Distinguished Visiting Professor, Chair of Arabic and Islamic Studies, a visiting Professor of Political Science at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. He's the Editor-in-Chief of the Oxford Encyclopedia of Islam and Politics, and he's had a long and distinguished teaching and publishing career in the most prestigious universities of the United States: the Woodrow Wilson International Center, Columbia University, Notre Dame, Harvard. The list of his achievements goes on and on, but there are more details in the conference booklet, which you should all have. So with that, I would like to now hand it over to Dr. Emad Shaheen. Dr. Emad.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray, for this generous introduction. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 8th International Conference of the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics, CILE, on key classical works on Islamic ethics. This year's conference highlights CILE's and the College of Islamic Studies' main objectives of bridging classical works and contemporary times. It also underscores the Center's scholarly contributions in the field of Islamic ethics. We are delighted that this year's conference comes as yet another significant collaboration between the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University and the University of Leuven. I would particularly like to thank you all as accomplished participants and esteemed guests for taking the time to contribute to this conference. The annual conference hosts 18 scholars presenting key classical works on Islamic ethics. The speakers are from a wide range of universities, including Georgetown, McGill University, University of Exeter, New York University, University of London, Goethe Universität Frankfurt, Leuven University, University of the Western Cape, Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies in Rome, University of Toledo, Qatar University, and Doha Institute. We're very proud and very pleased to have the contributions of all these esteemed institutions into the conference. As I mentioned, the key idea of the conference is to reflect the richness and interdisciplinary nature of Islamic ethics in our traditions. The proceedings of this conference will be published in the CILE peer-reviewed book series, Studies in Islamic Ethics, published by Brill. These proceedings are part of CILE's long-term plan of producing reference works in Islamic ethics to shape the field of contemporary scholarship. Today's conference reflects the essence of CILE's and the college's message, a message that we all share, and that is to promote a creative framework that succeeds in projecting a new system of ethical and universal values that the educated and activist Muslim can share with the rest of the community, and that the Muslim community can in turn share with the rest of the world. I do not wish to take much of the program's time, but would like to extend my deepest thanks and appreciation for the scholarly work that all CILE's team members, CILE researchers and professors, administrative staff has been producing in the field of Islamic ethics. I wish your conference all success, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Indeed, we have an illustrious lineup of speakers and participants, and this promises to be an educative and very lively conference. To introduce the conference, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Mu'taz Al-Khatib, who is Associate Professor of Methodology and Ethics at CILE and serving on the editorial board of CILE's book series, Studies in Islamic Ethics, and the Journal of Islamic Ethics, both published by Brill, as Dr. Emad just mentioned. His research interests include ethics and moral philosophy, Islamic law, hadith criticism, the higher objectives of Sharia, Maqasid al-Sharia, and Islamic intellectual history. Dr. Al-Khatib is a prolific scholar, publishing widely on key historical and contemporary ethical issues in Islam. And so he is regularly invited to give lectures and talks in many prestigious universities around the world, including the American University of Beirut, the University of California, Princeton, Cambridge, Oxford, University of Tübingen in Germany, and ZMO in Germany, and others. Again, For more details, please consult the conference booklet. Dr. Muataz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray. Thanks for our team and my colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, ethics has a central role to play today. This is a rare point of agreement, irrespective of our religious or ethnic background, or our specialization and profession. After an initial phase in which we were busy with exploring what we already have in the field of Islamic ethics and what to contribute to this emerging and promising field, CILE has been working for more than 2 years now on concrete initiatives to implement our main objective of playing a leading role in the interdisciplinary field of Islamic ethics. Our vision is premised on the idea that Islam as a world religion has a rich moral tradition that can make seminal contributions to global moral discourse. Within CILE, we work on two broad research agendas. We work on studying the vast Islamic moral tradition as fleshed out in various scholarly disciplines and how it interacted, influenced, and got influenced by other contemporaneous moral traditions, especially the Greek, Persian, and pre-Islam Arabic moral thought. Additionally, knowledge accumulated from this type of research is to be employed to produce a moral discourse rooted in the Islamic tradition, but concurrently open to dialogue and interaction with global modern moral deliberations. The proceedings, as we have heard from the Dean, the proceedings of this conference will result in a peer-reviewed journal, peer-reviewed publication that will serve as one of the forthcoming reference works produced by CILE. This reference work includes the Handbook of Islamic Ethics, whose publication contract has already been signed, and some of you will surely receive invitations soon to contribute to this project, in addition to a number of introductory works which are currently in the pipeline. I want to mention also the CILE peer-reviewed Journal of Islamic Ethics and the book series Studies in Islamic Ethics, both published by Brill. Both of them are available via open access, and we already have published 3 volumes of the journal and 3 edited volumes of the book series, in addition to other volumes in the process. These research activities and their output represent the core material that we use for other purposes, including teaching, public outreach, and training programs. As for teaching, we have recently established the Pioneer MA program in Applied Islamic Ethics. As for public outreach, we organize a wide range of activities, including summer school, winter school, and public lectures and seminars on almost a monthly basis. As for training programs, our publications serve as material for training professionals in various fields, including physicians and healthcare workers. Now, let's turn to the conference theme. Modern studies on classical works in Islamic ethics have been very limited in number and scope before George Porani and Majid Fakhri published their major works, which introduced Islamic ethics as a separate discipline. In the last 2 decades, many scholars have contributed to this nascent and still understudied discipline by bringing to the light many relevant classical texts through systematic analysis or translation, such as Muhammad al-Kun and Muhammad Abd al-Jabiri. A huge amount of Muslim literature relevant to the field of Islamic ethics, of ethics in general, and Islamic ethics specifically, is still, however, terra incognita. Against this background, we thought of bringing together the specialists who published works related to the field of Islamic ethics in order to shed light on understudied classical works or scholars. The main aim is to organize an international conference to facilitate in-depth deliberations about this emerging field and initiate critical discussions among these authors and to involve some of the senior scholars who made earlier contributions in these fields as well. In this conference, we have selected 18 works that cover various disciplines within Islamic tradition, including scriptural ethics, Adab, Fiqh and Ethics, Sufi ethics, philosophical and theological ethics. The texts date from the 2nd through 8th Hijri century. Most of these works are understudied. We are aware that there are other important keywords that we didn't cover or include in this conference, such as Uyun al-Akhbar by Ibn Qutayba, Masalih al-Anfus al-Abdan by Abi Zayd al-Balkhi, and other works. But we intend to cover these works in the prospective publication. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants for accepting our invitation and being part of this project. Thanks also for my colleagues in CILE for their help and support.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moataz. Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Okay, so now I will hand over the job of moderator to our dear colleague, Dr. Ibrahim Zain, who will moderate the first session on Adab, Fiqh and Ethics. Dr. Ibrahim.
Well, thank you very much, Professor. I think my job is a very easy one, perhaps. I'll just take 5 minutes to introduce this session and to introduce as well the speakers of this first session of the conference, and then tell you about, the rules and regulations we are going to follow in this first session of the conference. Well, it gives me great pleasure, to introduce the first speaker, Stevan Christo Nagy. I'm sorry, whether I pronounce your name properly or not. I just apologize in advance. He is a senior lecturer in Arabic and Islamic Studies at the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies of the University of Exeter. He has published on Islamic social and intellectual history, political and religious thought, wisdom, literature, and arts. And he authored quite a number of works. And if you want to see more, details of his biodata, please refer to the booklet of the conference. The second speaker is going to be Dr. Edi Setia. He is a Malaysian. I know him personally. And he is also a scholar of Islamic studies. He did his first degree and second degree and third degree in Malaysia within the International Islamic University of Malaysia and the prestigious Institute of International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC. And he worked there for some time. And if you want more details, about his biodata, please refer to the booklet. Now, the things which I would like to introduce this session with would be the following. That first of all, we have to keep in mind that talking about these key classical texts in Islamic civilization, and the starting point here in this conference is going to be with Ibn al-Mukhaf and Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Shaybani. The first book is Al-Adab al-Kabir and Al-Adab al-Saghir of Ibn al-Mukhaf, and the second book is Kitab al-Kasb, which has been attributed to Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Shaybani, the associate and perhaps the student of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf as well. And he is also a great teacher. He actually communicated the Hanafi fiqh to Imam Shafi'i, though Imam Shafi'i had a great debate with him. So these are two important, I guess, figures if we are to speak about Islamic intellectualism and Islamic sciences as well. Both of them served the Abbasid Caliphate. Ibn al-Muqaffa also is a senior one who served both. I mean, the Umayyad Caliphate or the Umayyad dynasty as well as the Abbasid dynasty as well. He died a very tragic one, but Ibn al-Muqaffa, Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Shaybani, as well we know, was a very important figure in the state apparatus. He was Qadi al-Qubat. I mean, a very important position in the Abbasid Caliphate. He came after Abu Yusuf, managing this important intellectual and legal office. And when we are introducing these two, perhaps this was the thought of the organizer or the host of this very important conference, that when we are introducing these two important figures, we are having in mind that issues concerning ethics from an Islamic perspective, perhaps, and that doesn't mean that ethics are not universal in nature, but Islamic perspective, perhaps in this regard, will bring in the Islamic worldview. But the most important assumption here is that when we are speaking about ethics and values, we are not speaking about something which is governed by the sensibility of what is false and true. It isn't an issue of truth and falsity, but rather it's an issue of more discoveries and less discoveries in these universal values that we all cherish and all adhere to. Now, as I said, I mean, my work is going to be very simple. I'll just introduce the first speaker, and as I said to you all, his biodata is with you, and he is, of course, a very learned scholar in this field, and his contributions are going to be demonstrated, I guess, in his presentation. One thing I would like to remind Professor Esteban is that he has only 20 minutes. Yes, please, Professor Esteban.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Zain. Thank you for this very interesting introduction. I enjoyed listening to it. I will be slightly over time, not much, but I wrote my text, and it will be very difficult to trim it down. I try to be as close to the 20 minutes as possible. So the title of my talk is How to Reform the Islamic Empire, Ibn al-Muqaffa's use of the Golden Age myth in producing trans-religious, cosmopolitan ethics, and post-revolutionary political propaganda. Thank you very much for inviting me to this excellent conference on classical works of Islamic ethics. Ibn al-Muqaffa's entire oeuvre is highly relevant to this topic in a special way, as we will see. His whole impact would deserve several books. Today, I'll focus on a perhaps astonishing, but all the more fundamental notion of ethics, time, or era. We'll examine how Ibn al-Muqaffa used different versions of the topos of Golden Age in introductions of his theoretical Adab works, as well as in his actual political texts. But before getting there, I'll start with a short introduction on Ibn al-Muqaffa and his writings. So let's fly back in time, some decades before the end of the Umayyad era. According to our sources, Ibn al-Muqaffa was from Jur, today's Firuzabad in Fars. His original Persian name was Ruzbah, son of Daduya. His father was a Persian nobleman who worked as a tax officer for the Arab governors. He was tortured, and his hand remained muqaffa', that is, shriveled or crippled. Hence, his son was called in Arabic Ibn al-Muqaffa', the son of the shriveled or crippled. Nevertheless, Daduya provided a special education for his son that made possible for Ibn al-Muqaffa to achieve legendary mastery of the language of the Arab conquerors. He was also conversant with their culture and religion. He could pair this familiarity with his expertise of the languages, literatures, courtly manners, and administrative skills of his Persian ancestors. This education prepared Ibn al-Mukhaf to work as a professional intellectual, a katib, that is, a scribe, secretary, administrator, and advisor for the highest Arab dignitaries in the turbulent times preceding and following the revolution that brought the Abbasids to power. Ibn al-Mukhaf worked for governors and generals of the Umayyads, but following the victory of the Abbasids, he served the uncles of the first two caliphs of the new dynasty, As-Saffah and Al-Mansur. His murder, which occurred before 139 or 140 Hijri, that is 757 or 758 AD, was one of the hideous episodes in the struggle for power within the Abbasid family. The works attributed to Ibn al-Mukhaf are fundamental in the history of Arabic prose literature and are also highly important in the history of Islamic and universal political, ethical, and religious thought. They are also significant for the history of Islamic law and economic theories. Today, we'll investigate shortly the concepts related to time in his introductions to his Kitab al-Adab al-Saghir, the minor book of Adab, Kitab al-Adab al-Kabir, the major book of Adabs, his Risala al-Sahaba, epistle on the companions of the Caliph, and his Al-Yatima, the peerless pearl. I discussed the question of the authenticity of these works in previous publications, and I also intend to return to the topic in a new book I plan to write. This is a complicated problem, so I'll only summarize it in order to save time, which is our worst enemy in talks, even when it is our actual topic. Based on external evidence, as well as on parallelisms in style and content between the works attributed to Ibn al-Mukhaf, I consider the above-mentioned texts authentic. They are certainly authentic in the sense that they are written in the same spirit and reflect the same intellectual context, even if their author is not the same person, though I believe it is. The other question is originality. To which degree should we regard Ibn al-Mukhaf as a translator, compiler, or an author? Was he an original thinker or a mere transmitter? I hope this talk will contribute to a reply to these questions. But I need to make 2 points in advance. Ibn al-Mukhaf's oeuvre offers a clear demonstration that the concepts of originality as well as that of translation were different in his age than today. But there is more here. On the one hand, Ibn al-Mukhaf purposefully masked his originality by hiding behind the authority of authors of the past. On the other hand, he artfully used in his own actual political writings the images and theories of the text he translated. So let's start with his Kitab al-Adab al-Saghir, more specifically with the introduction, which is the only section of the text that Ibn al-Mukhaf claims to be his original composition. This introduction is indeed a rhetorical gem, which describes the importance of adab in polishing the intellect and leading to right action. However, Ibn al-Mukhaf also includes into this introduction a disclaimer of originality for himself and any other author. He compares the craft of the author to that of a jeweler who assembles gemstones and produces of gold and silver, refined jewels and dishes. Building on a Quranic verse, he also compares authors to the bee whose healing products come from the good fruits that Allah made grow. In this way, Ibn al-Mukhaf makes an argument for compilations of wisdom from old texts like the one he produces here. He does not mention, however, the fact that these old texts are not Islamic, but mostly Sassanian. He rather refers to Allah in his second sentence, and he also links the validity of Adab to a chain of authority, which is similar to that of the different intellectual traditions in Islam, including, perhaps most importantly, the transmission of Hadith. He is not only translating Sassanian ethical and political advice literature into Arabic, but he is assimilating it to Islam. Let's turn now to the Kitab al-Adab al-Kabir. The attribution of the Kitab al-Adab al-Kabir to Ibn al-Mukhaf is uncontested. While most of the text is probably translated from Pahlavi, that is, Middle Persian, its introduction and conclusion are added by Ibn al-Mukhaf. You may have noticed that while the title of this work is usually known as Al-Adab al-Kabir, I use the title Kitab al-Adab al-Kabir. The short explanation is that this title corresponds to the references to this text in classical Arabic literature, and it is also in harmony with the fact that this work consists of several different sections, adabs, hence the use of the plural form adab. In the introduction, Ibn al-Mukhaf refers to the wisdom of the people of the past, whom he describes as superior to the people of his present in every respect, and identifies his work as some trivia deriving from their legacy and contributing to the education adab that people need. What Ibn al-Mukhaf does here is very interesting. By claiming an originality for his own work and for anyone else in his time, and acknowledging the superiority of the people of the past, he cleverly conflates the intellectual heritage of two distinct traditions. The idea that all knowledge must be derived from a golden age in the past, following the predecessor's life conduct, seerah, utterances, hadith, and books, kutub, looks perfectly Islamic, and Ibn al-Mukhaf clearly induces his reader to associate this description more or less consciously to the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet. Let's illustrate this just with two sentences. I quote them in the excellent translation by Hertiam Fahelder, and then I'll also read the Arabic, as no translation can render the Islamic connotations of the original verse chosen by Ibn al-Mukhaf. The first sentence talks about the superiority of the people of the past. Their men of religion reached a higher degree of religiosity, both in terms of knowledge and practice, than do the men of religion in our own time. And now the Arabic. Sorry, the sheet flew away. فكان صاحب الدين منهم أبلغ في أمر الدين علما وعملا من صاحب الدين منا. The second sentence I quote talks about the necessary dependence of the scholars of the present of Ibn al-Mukhaf on their superior predecessors. In our time, the utmost a scholar can know is by drawing on their knowledge. The most beneficent deeds that a benefactor may do is by emulating their conduct. And the best speech that a speaker amongst us can find is by looking in their writings, so that he appears to be conversing with them and listening to them. فمنتهى علم عالمنا في هذا الزمان أن يأخذ من علمهم، وغاية إحسان محسننا أن يقتدي بسيرتهم. فأحسن ما يصيب من الحديث محدثنا أن ينظر في كتبهم فيكون كأنه إياهم يحاور ومنهم يستمع. The usage of Islamic terminology is crucial because the ideas that Ibn al-Mukhaf will present in the rest of the work have no Islamic roots at all. They are derived from Sasanian advice literature and Islamized by Ibn al-Mukhaf. Thus, he uses keywords and concepts of Islam in an artful way in order to propagate pre-Islamic values of Sasanian culture. As a result, by assimilating Sasanian advice literature to Islamic language, not only to Arabic but to its religious register, Ibn al-Mukhaf contributes to the introduction of trans-religious or cosmopolitan ethics into Islamic civilization. This cosmopolitanism has deep roots in antiquity, but it was challenged by a less tolerant attitude in late antiquity due to the tendency of linking imperial identity to a specific religion. Ibn al-Mukhaf is an heir of a cosmopolitan trend in Sasanian culture that absorbed Hellenism and Indian influences. His legacy continued in the similarly trans-religious and cosmopolitan ethics of the Tahdhib al-Ahlak by the Christian Arab philosopher Yahya ibn Adi. Its trans-religious character faded, but its cosmopolitanism was integrated into the works of Muslim authors who continued to Islamize its content and style, both by amalgamating them further with Islamic elements and by naturalizing their originally non-Islamic elements as Islamic. In the rest of this talk, I'd like to show how Ibn al-Mukhaf used the idea of Golden Age in another way as a tool of political propaganda. The letter of Tanzan is a Sasanian text translated into Arabic by Ibn al-Mukhaf. This Arabic version is no longer extant, but we know it through its Persian translation. In this letter, there is a long passage describing the present of the author, Tanzan, as a period of dramatic decline. The function of this passage is to justify the brutal reforms by the founder of the Sasanian dynasty and Tanzan's contemporary, Ardashir, as a restoration of order. In pre-modern societies, the political ideal was to maintain the divinely sanctified order. The idea of change was rarely welcome, and evolution was normally conceptualized as devolution. Revolution and consolidation after a successful turnover, dawla, with the term used by Ibn al-Mukhaf, needed to be justified as a return to an original golden age. In his two texts written for and on behalf of the new Abbasid dynasty, dawla, Ibn al-Mukhaf does precisely that. He depicts the immediate pre-revolutionary past as an era of corruption and presents the new ruler as a reformer in the sense of turning back the entire community towards the right direction. These two texts are his Risalah al-Sahaba, which provides a practical post-revolutionary political program for the new Abbasid dynasty, and his Al-Yatima, which is an epistle meant to be quite possibly a public speech written as a piece of propaganda for them. Both use masterfully Islamic terminology and concepts with Sasanian theories without ever referring to the latter. In sum, Ibn al-Mukhaf applied the Sasanian theories he knew to the Islamic context he lived in, and thus created outstanding and still understudied works of Islamic political and ethical thought. Back to the example of the concept of time. In the introduction of the Risalah al-Sahaba, Ibn al-Mukhaf links the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur to the figure of Joseph, who is conceived in Islam as an archetype of the ideal leader who acts as an agent of God, in contrast with the Pharaoh who disobeys God by placing himself in the place of God. It is also noteworthy that the term Sahaba, which is used in the Risalah al-Sahaba for the entourage of the Caliph, is the same as the as the one commonly applied to the companions of the Prophet. So we have references to two Islamic golden ages here, an explicit one to that of Yusuf, and an implicit one to that of the Prophet of Islam and his companions. The most detailed theory of time in Ibn al-Muqaffa's oeuvre is presented in his Al-Yatima, where Ibn al-Muqaffa describes the eras of human history as being of four types. The old topos of four eras provides here an ideological scheme for the political dynamics between rulers and ruled. According to this scheme, the best era is when both the ruler or the shepherd, the Arabic term used is ra'i, and the subject or flock, the Arabic term used is ra'aya, are righteous. According to this description, the era of the second type, when the shepherd is righteous but the flock is corrupt, is better than an era of the third type, when the shepherd is corrupt while the flock is righteous. This is because the shepherd may have power to amend the ways of his flock, while the flock, even if righteous, has no power to overcome the ruler's corruption. The worst era is when both the shepherd and the flock are corrupt. In both Al-Yatima and the Risala fi Sahaba, Ibn al-Muqaffa clearly presents his time as that of a ruler turning back the flock from the way of corruption, where they were led by the previous corrupt dynasty. The text of Al-Yatima is full of Quranic references, which is in harmony with its nature as a public speech and letter of propaganda. We have only fragments of the text, and the one including this discussion on the four eras, which is clearly the introduction, ends with two sections, one praising the merits of the commander of the believers, followed by another on the rights of the messenger of God. I assume that the text continued by linking these two, the Imam to the Prophet, as it is done implicitly in the Risala fi Sahaba. So Ibn al-Muqaffa, who translated the letter of Tanzan, which offered justification for the revolution and reforms of the founder of the Sasanian dynasty as a restorer of order, instauring a new golden age, transferred his justification to the Abbasid takeover and consolidation. Moreover, Ibn al-Muqaffa fused this scheme with the Islamic idea of the golden age, of the times of the messenger of God and his companions, Sahaba, and sanctified it further by blending it to the necessary amount of Quranic language. Quite an impressive demonstration of the art of a jeweler who only joins gems together. Isn't it pretty original from someone who claimed not to produce anything original and hid himself systematically behind the authority of the sages of the past? To conclude, it is quite obvious that Ibn al-Muqaffa's usage of religion and myths was stunningly pragmatic. In a section of his Kitab al-Adab, al-Kabir, he openly described religion as a political tool, and he used it indeed in this way in his actual political texts. It would be, however, a serious mistake to equate this pragmatism with immorality or amorality. In fact, his accusation did not appear even in those texts in which he was blamed for his zandaka. His pragmatism was in harmony with his deep moral principle of promoting the light of intellect in the darkness of ignorance. He was reportedly murdered at the age of 36, seeing his limbs hacked off one by one and cast into the fire of an oven. We are also informed that his murder happened with the consent or on the order of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur. Nevertheless, as a translator, author, cultural broker, and thinker, his influence has been immense and lasting. His translation of Kalila wa Dimna, of which we couldn't even talk today, is the source of countless versions in a multitude of languages, both in Islamdom and Christendom, and his entire oeuvre contributed to one of the real golden ages of human culture under the cosmopolitan Islamic rule of the Abbasids. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan. I guess that's very kind of you. I guess we finished before time, 2 minutes before time, which is great. I really appreciate that. But I just would like to add one thing, that seeing, as you, intelligently, I guess, analyzed the text of Ibn al-Mukhaf, I would just like to add to this that from an Islamic perspective, and I guess you know this better than me perhaps, that when it comes to ethics and values, Islam had this very firm stand that the Prophet ﷺ, as a role model of values and ethics in Islam, was making this very important statement that إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that humanity prior to the advent of Islam and the coming of the Prophet ﷺ was very much, in this discovery of values and implementing values. And it's not that the Prophet ﷺ started from scratch in the beginning. No, not at all. And the second thing, which is quite clear, I guess, in Islamic sensibility, as I said at the beginning, the issue here is not about truth and falsity, unlike theology and theological issues. The issue here is about discovering more values and less values. And that is not the monopoly of the Muslims, but rather Muslims can borrow from others and be enlightened by others, and the experience of the rest of humanity as well is very valuable to the Muslims in this regard. And I think his pragmatism, I just would like to say, perhaps was very political, and I don't want to connect, his tragic death with his sensibility in ethics, because whatever he said, I guess, is going to be continued by a great jurist like Al-Mawardi. And Mawardi will never shy away from attributing so many statements to Ardashir, as you know better than me in this regard. Thank you very much again, I guess, and we will wait up until the session for discussion to listen to some, perhaps, fireworks coming from the audience. I would like to introduce the second speaker. I already introduced him in my introduction, so I don't want to take more of his time, but I just would like to remind Professor Edi Setia, my good friend from Malaysia, that we are giving him only 20 minutes. Please keep the time. The floor is yours.
We cannot hear you.
All right, yeah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you hear me now? All right. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you so much for the host CILE and for the invitation. And all right, okay, my topic today is the Gita Akasa of Imam Muhammad Ash-Shaybani. As we all know, Imam Muhammad Ash-Shaybani is one of the two foremost students of Imam Abu Hanifa. The other is, of course, Qadi Abu Yusuf, and Imam Shaybani is the other two, second or the third pillar of the Hanafi school. And he lived about in the year was born in the year 132 slash 729, which is quite in the first 2 centuries of Islam, and he studied with Imam Malik, and Imam Shafi was also one of his students. So and anyway, he wrote a. I mean, he wrote on fiqh, he wrote on hadith, and one of his most interesting books is the Gita Akasa, which we can consider to be one of the first more or less systematic books on what we now call economics, right? But but then on the one hand, the book is about economics, or specifically on the ethics and pragmatics of the pursuit of right livelihood, right? Kasab Tayyib. And interestingly, when he was asked, someone asked him, why don't you write a book on zuhud, on abstinence? And he said, yeah, I already wrote it, and it is the book Gita Akasa. So and when we read the book Gita Akasa, we find that it is a what we may call the operationalization of the ethics, of the moral imperative of zuhud, of abstinence, in the very process of our engagement in the world, in the pursuit of our livelihood, in farming or trading, buying and selling. So so it is. So in that sense, it's at once a book on practical Sufism, right? It's on the virtues. It's on the spiritual virtues in the context of the daily engagement of most people in the market, in the workplace. So and his book and this book is comparable to many of the early proto-tasawwuf or proto-Sufi texts, like those of Al-Muhasibi, right? For example, with his Kitab Al-Makasib wa Wara, and also a few other works on the ethics, on the spiritual virtues of zuhud, of abstinence, of wara, scrupulousness, on tawakkul, reliance, and interestingly, the way these spiritual principles or spiritual concepts were articulated is that they are articulated in concrete context of the normal people. I mean, the ordinary folks who are out in the streets working for a living. So basically, it's about how to operationalize the spiritual virtues while in the midst of your daily concern with earning a living. So it's a kind of Sufism in action, and quite. So what I'm trying to say is that it seems that the earliest proto-Sufi texts were texts that were focused on the practical application of the virtues in the lives of ordinary people, not, I mean, as opposed to imams or shuyukh ulama who are mostly in the ivory tower of the madrasa and the mosque, not really engaged in the out in the street or trading and so on. So so we can read texts like the Kitab Akasa, or what we may call the Kasab General in early Islamic economic thought, that the Kasab type of writing. We can call that a books that is on those books are on tackle the issue of the material and the moral economy, and integrate them into one seamless total economic vision, right? Which of course totally different from the current separation of economics from ethics, right? So anyway, so we can say that the early Islamic so-called what we may call economic thought is at once about the moral economy and the material economy, and how the two is to be integrated into one seamless economy. Okay, so that kind of overview the book, and then I would like to just to highlight just pick out some excerpts, some passages from the book. I've sent my paper to Dr. Mukhtar, and paper you can read if you like, but and there and by the way, the Gita Akasa is, I mean, it's not a standalone book. It's a lot of that book is part of the long multi-volume Kitab Al-Maqsud, the big book on Hanafi fiqh by Imam Asaraksi. So there's a lot of what we may call like mixture between the actual words of Imam Shaibani and the commentary on it by Imam Saraksi, who lived about 2 or 3 centuries later. But anyway, but on the whole, the core message of the Kitab Akasa can be reliably attributed to Imam Al-Shaibani. Okay, and then I would like to go to some of the main themes of the book. And so he talks about the meaning, the definition of earning, of kasab, and then the hierarchy of livelihoods. So there is a idea that not all vocations are created equal. There are some vocations like farming that is considered most beneficial because of their wider benefit. And next is commerce, right? And then next is craftsmanship, like practicing a trade. And then lastly is wage labor. So there is this notion of the maratib al-makasib, right? Based on certain consideration. And then there's some polemics against some of the more passive of the Sufis who claim that tawakkul means you just sit down and you don't work and just wait for the success to come to you. And in Shaibani text, and also in some of the similar texts by Al-Muhasibi, and so there's a lot of like polemics against some of the more extreme faction of the Sufis that misunderstood tawakkul to be you just sit down and just wait for stuff to come to you. But then the mainstream Sufis say no. Yes, you have zuhud, tawakkul, but still you need to go out and earn a livelihood if you can work. And zuhud means to avoid the haram and to avoid what is doubtful, right? And then to spend on what is needed and what is moderate, and then to infaq, and then to give away the surplus in charity or in Al-Mukhaf, and so that would be a zuhud in practice for most people, right? and doesn't mean you just sit back and just wait for stuff to come to you. So there was lots of detailed polemics against the more passive of the Sufis, right? And it's interesting to look at this what we may call intra-Sufi debates on working or not working and so on. And then what interesting thing is that there is a connection, and the Gita Akasa made a clear connection between working for your personal interest in the pursuit of your livelihood through working or commerce, and how that is related to sufficing the wider interest of the community. So here we have a notion of earning a livelihood as a way by which you pursue your personal interest in the very process of promoting the public interest. So we see here a vision of private enterprise as a integration between private interest and the wider interest. So there's no, there's no trade-off between your private interest and the public interest. The private interest is seen to be a function of the wider public interest. So so they have and therefore there is a vision of the economic life as promoting social solidarity. So I think that's and that kind of message I find to be very relevant in the current situation, right? The 1% versus the 99%, the current antagonism between the 1% versus the 99%, that kind of scenario will be totally alien to the economic vision of early Islam. And I think the late Professor Michael Bonner has wrote some very nice articles on the moral battery economy of early Islam, and I think inshallah it's good to look at some of his papers in this regard. Sadly, he passed away some months ago. Right, and how much time do I have left?
5 minutes.
10 minutes? Oh, good. Yeah, good.
No, not 10 minutes. I said 5 minutes. You doubled them.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, good. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, and then there is and in the Gita Al-Kasam and in all the similar Maqasid texts, there is a warning, like a admonition against beggary. Right. There is a looking down towards those who beg, asking for handouts, asking for subsidies, asking what they can work, right? So that means the current so it means that the current scenario of perfectly healthy young people unemployed, but they're perfectly healthy and perfectly capable of working, of earning, and have that kind of scenario is alien. That the notion of unemployment, because the Islamic ethos is that all those who can work must work to take care of themselves, to provide for themselves, and then if they have extra, to provide for their families, and then if they have extra, to provide for the community through charity, zakat, Al-Mukhaf. And it's only when you are totally destitute, like you are hit by a calamity, or you are a orphan, or like you are very sick, and only then. But then the notion, but then there is still no beggary, because then it is the duty of the rich to proactively provide for the unfortunate. Otherwise, the whole idea is that working for a livelihood as a way of providing for yourself, and then indirectly providing for a larger interest of society, that is seen to be both a personal and a communal responsibility, and hence the pursuit of livelihood is seen as fardu kifaya. And here fardu kifaya means, and we need to translate the concept fard kifaya literally, meaning fard means the obligation or the duty of kifaya, of sufficing the needs of the community. Right, so that's what it means, the duty of sufficing the needs of the community. So the vision here is that your personal pursuit of livelihood is to suffice the needs of the community by is that the based on the saying on the principle intizam amru al-kulli meaning that the well-orderedness of society is dependent on each of the components or each individual in that society cooperating with their respective skills and expertise and vocation that complement one another, and thereby provide for the common needs of all in the society. And that is interestingly how one of the interpretation of the hadith ikhtilaf fi ummati rahmah, meaning the differences in my community is a mercy. And one of the interpretation is that the differences, the differentiation in the vocation of my community is a mercy, right? So there is a notion of solidarity in diversity. I think my time is almost up. So anyway, to conclude, we can the details you can read in my paper, and then there are a lot of footnotes to especially to the studies of Professor Michael Bonner. And so basically we have a vision of the economic life in which the moral aspect, in which the moral economy is thoroughly in which the material economy is thoroughly integrated into the moral economy and becoming one seamless single economy, and the pursuit of private interest is seen to be a function of the larger pursuit of the common good. So in short, we may conclude that the maqasid general in early Islamic social economic thought can be seen as as it's all about the pursuit of right livelihood for the common good. Maqasid thayyibah wa masalih amma. Thank you and shukran. Wassalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Professor. Well, that's. I mean, you finished like your like Professor Esteban on time. I'm very grateful to both of you, I guess. So I don't have to interfere and do things which are unpleasant to any of you. Now, you all, I guess, would agree with me. I mean, we listened to two learned presentations by Stefan and Eddie Setia. And I would like just to say this, that before I open the floor for discussion, that these two scholars, these two great scholars of Islam, Ibn al-Mukhaf and Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, they lived at the time, they were contemporaries. Perhaps the only difference is that Ibn al-Mukhaf time was a very volatile, politically speaking, time compared with the time of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. At the time of Ibn al-Mukhaf, the situation was very precarious and unpredictable at all. and the new rulers, I guess, of the Islamic dynasty were, somewhat they were reckless, and that's why it ended up that kind of tragic death of Ibn al-Mukhaf. At the time of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, I guess, a lot of stability was there, and I can tell, from the presentation of Professor Eddie Sethi, that was a time when the state was very stable, and that's why a new type of sensibility in ethical discussion developed among the jurists. The very idea of al-kasb, as Professor Eddie Sethi, rightly said, it's a kind of an understanding of economics within the Islamic framework by bringing in these values of tawakkul, the right way of understanding tawakkul and the right way of understanding infaq, or charity, and the right way of understanding the whole idea of sabr, and the correct way of understanding zuhud, not the deviant way which has been propagated by some Sufis, as he said. And I got this, that it was a kind of an admonition for, or perhaps an admonition against, the whole essay was an admonition against beggary, and it's an admonition for work. Everybody have got to work and contribute to the public wealth. And that's a high Islamic value that should be cherished by everybody. I think these are very important things, I guess, to bring into the discussion. I would open the floor for questions and perhaps comments. And at the end, I guess I'll give each of you, the speakers, 4 minutes. So now we have almost 35 minutes for discussion, or less, perhaps, than 35 minutes for discussion. Perhaps we'll have 20 minutes for discussion now, and then we'll have some time for the learned speakers, I guess, to respond to some of the issues that are going to be raised by those who are going to ask questions and perhaps put some statements. Now the floor is open. Can I see some hands?
Can I speak, Professor Ibrahim? This is Raja Bahlul speaking.
Yeah, Raja Bahlul, please, Professor Raja. Yeah, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I thank the speakers for these presentations. I have a question for Dr. Estevan, and if I may, I don't know if it's right to involve the moderator in the discussion, but I have a comment or a question for the moderator, Dr. Ibrahim, as well, if I may. So for Dr. Estevan, can you please tell us briefly, if you can, what is the specifically moral or ethical content of the texts which you discussed? For example, what is the nature of the moral corruption which is attributed to the pre-revolutionary time, and its opposite, which by implication is attributed to the golden age? So this is for Dr. Estevan. I want to take issue with something that Dr. Ibrahim has said, I think, in more than one time, something to the effect that the issue in these discussions is not so much a question of a truth or falsity, but rather the discovery of more or less values or something along these lines, if I understood correctly. My problem is this. If you talk about discovery of more or less values, the very notion of discovery implicates truth and falsity, because you cannot very well discover something which is kind of false or is not the case. So you don't actually succeed in avoiding the issue of the truth and falsity. It's just a separate, different issue. And secondly, the notion of value, as I understand it, in of itself is general, and it can include negative or commendable commendable values, as well as incommendable values, such as, for example, justice and injustice are both values. One of them is commendable, is good, the other is not, but all are values in the general neutral sense of the term. So these are the points I wish to make, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Bahlul. Thanks. I really appreciate your comment and your questions as well. Can we take another question? Yes. Professor Esteban, please take note of the question which was asked by Professor Bahlul, okay?
Sorry, may I?
Please, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you so much for the speakers and for you too. My question is addressed to Dr. Adi. Actually, I was thinking about the term kasb as a theological concept. You mentioned that Shaybani actually addressed this concept in response to the Sufi tawakkul, for example, or misunderstanding of tawakkul. Don't you think that also he could integrated it in the debate of theological debate of al-qada wal-qadar, since we may find, for example, that he was discussing or debating the karamit when using the term itself as kasb. And I know that it is a bit earlier than the Ash'arit elaborated this term in their the principles of their faith, but don't you think that this is the beginning of this use of the concept as a theological core concept in this debate?
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Appreciate that. We will take, I guess, a third question, and then perhaps we will refer to the two speakers as well.
Dr. Abdul-Wahid, may I ask a question?
Yes, Father Jason, yeah. Go ahead.
It relates to the question that was just asked about tawakkul. On one hand, I think it's simple to say that tawakkul does not mean abandoning the responsibility to earn a livelihood and begging constantly for one's daily sustenance. But once someone claims that a believer has the obligation to earn a livelihood, it becomes more difficult to articulate where is the line between tawakkul and bukhl, and trying to grasp too much, focusing on private gain. I would just be interested in the basic question of once we say that we have to earn, what is tawakkul and what is not? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just would like to make this announcement, to the public who are attending this session. You can write your questions, and then we will attend to it shortly, inshallah. Now we will just ask Esteban Faris to respond to the questions which were raised to him, as well as Adi Saiti to respond to the questions as well.
So, may I also react on some things you said in the conclusions, which I really enjoyed. I have an evolutionary approach to cultural studies as well. So I think that the current tendency in the humanities that we are imitating, we are required more and more to imitate the style of the hard sciences, and on the other hand, we don't tend to take much of their content. And I'm trying to change that in the sense that my own thought is evolutionary. And talk about openness and quite some systems which are closed and inflexible. They don't subsist. That's a general phenomenon of evolution, and it's also a phenomenon of culture and society, and I think religion. So all successful religions have an openness and flexibility in them, and we should keep them that way. Then on the versatility of Ibn al-Mukhaf's times and the revolution. So what he was trying to do is something very spectacular and very difficult. So first of all, to argue for revolution in pre-modern society is not an easy thing. Then to argue for stopping the revolution and say that now we reached what we wanted is always immensely difficult. So stopping a revolution, consolidation after revolution is very, very much a task. We know that all too well even today. So what he was trying to do is somehow to stop the wheel of this blood meal of revolution, which was ongoing, and he was still killed by this wheel, and to some extent his killing was a kind of necessary step by Al-Mansur, who eliminated him as a way too intelligent advisor of his uncles, who became his rivals. Yes, and thank you very much, Professor Baklul, on the question of the moral values propagated. So it is also well, all the texts are full with moral and political advice. So it is impossible for me to summarize them. But well, one thing what is important is to be very careful, especially when one is close to power, to be immensely careful in that environment and not to do anything which is immoral. Try to avoid to do immoral things, even one is asked to do that, and to stick to one's own moral standards. And for this reason, it is better not to be in the close reach of power. But on the other hand, he says that this is where you can actually do things. Now, and this is of course linked to the period where he lived in, though it is also quite universal. What he writes on power is unfortunately still as true as when he wrote it. Now, in his text, there is always a section which is already there in the letter of Tanzan, and again, it was relevant for Ibn al-Mukhaf. In nearly all his texts, we find a description, a very vivid description of decline. And Ibn al-Mukhaf is very aristocratic, or rather meritocratic. So he's more about hasab than nasab, but he's definitely against the upheaval and the rise of unqualified, amoral arrivists and careerists on power and taking over the place of people of merit who who don't show off and but want to do real good work and for the society. So I think we might summarize his thought that way in such a short time. That's what comes to my mind first.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Professor Edi Sethi?
Yes. Okay. The first question. Thank you for the question. The first question is on the theological aspect of kasab. In the Maqasid text, kasab there is focused on is focused on the meaning of earning a livelihood, on working, on saya, on haraka in making a living. So it is basically it's more of a ethical transactional or muamala concept, like an ethical concept, rather than a kalami or creedal concept. I mean, so it's more about it's more about the pragmatics of the ethics of okay guys, it's more a ethical question rather than a theological question in the kasab text. So I mean, there's no so that's it. Of course there is a theological dimension to the notion of kasab, but that is largely not discussed in the Maqasid text, right? And as for the second question, the tawakkul is a basically like tawakkul and suhud and so on. Those are basically virtues of the heart, right? So whereas the working and so on, those I mean the industry, the exercise, those are the what call it, the active virtues of the body. So the Maqasid text I mean it tries to, or it's in a way try to I mean it explain the relationship between the inner virtues of the spirit of the heart, like reliance on Allah and abstinence and so on. How the inner spiritual intangible virtues are to be related to the outward physical virtues of working, and how that can be harmonized. So basically, to summarize, it's like how Muslims can go about being active in the world while not being of the world, right? How to enjoy or to do the things in life without being to use matter, to use materials, to have the enjoyments of life without being materialistic, without being hedonistic. So so for instance, is that one of the signs of tawakkul is that that when you go out and work, and when you have enough, then you stop, and then you devote the rest of your time to cultivating the higher human aspiration, like gaining more knowledge or refining your character. So that's one sign of tawakkul. Okay, another sign of tawakkul is that when you have enough, and instead of having more and more, and you have trust in God, and then you give the rest away in charity. So that's one sign of tawakkul. So in a way, the kasab text show how people can go about working actively in their livelihoods as as a expression of the inner virtues of the inner virtues, and some of the in fact in the non-Muslim and some Western also Christian non-Muslim thinkers have the notion of the meaning of good work is that work that one has meaning and that makes your spirit flourish, and on the other hand, it has a social relevance. It has relevance to some need in society. So so I think that's how so basically it's how to embody the inner spiritual virtues in the outward physical manifestation of work, right? So all that can be summarized in the hadith about tying your camel, which is like the physical work, and then tawakkul, and then have reliance on God. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fadi Sethi. I just if you allow me, I guess just to respond to Professor Raja Bahlul. Yeah. Let me just clarify my position. Perhaps I just said that statement which might have raised some sort of misunderstanding or perhaps a very profound misunderstanding. The way I see values, that values do not belong to this world, but rather they belong to the ideal realm. So we human beings are the agents who are going to realize these values in concrete human actions. So our realization of these values is governed by the more and less, more discovery and less discovery in the realization of the value. That's why it's not an issue of truth and falsity. And as I said, I'm not contradicting myself when I said it's a discovery. It is discovery in realization. It's not a discovery in knowing. If it were to be a discovery in knowing, yes, I mean, I would be certainly contradict myself. But I was saying the realization in a concrete human act of a specific value, which belongs by its nature to the ideal realm. And its realization was done by the human agent. And the human agent, in his realization or her realization of that specific value, would discover more and less, or less perhaps. And those who know more are duty-bound, ethically speaking, to teach and enlighten those who did not discover more in that specific value. I don't consider injustice as a value, but rather I will see it as a disvalue. So justice is a value, and injustice obviously is a disvalue in that regard. Perhaps we are not in contradiction. This is the way I feel it. Perhaps I was not clear enough to make my stand on this issue. Now, if you allow me, we have public who are also enthusiastic about participating in this very important discussion. And I would like to ask Mona, can you read their questions to the learned speakers, please?
You want me to read from the chat box?
Please read the questions, and then they will be answered by the speakers.
All right. So there is a question to Dr. Sita. The book Al-Mukhaf is the first book in Islamic economics, and its author, Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani, can be considered a pioneer Islamic economic. Can you briefly provide us with the foundations on which the economic theory of al-Shaybani was based?
Thank you. I mean, you can read from the text itself, the Gita Akasa. The whole book is based on the ayahs of the Quran and on the hadith and on the sayings or the athar of the companions and the early practices of the Muslims, plus some heuristic or fiqh inferences So the whole book is like a quasi fiqh Asari take on livelihoods. So so that is what I call it the religious approach to the question of economics. But of course, at that time, of course, and that can be compared to the Greek notion of economics as tadbir and manzil, as the management or the stewardship of the household, and there is a lot of ethical parallelism between the religious take on the economic life and the philosophical take on the economic life. And I think the point of meeting between the two is the notion that the economic domain of life, livelihood, working, business, and so on, is seen in both the philosophical notion of economics and the religious notion of economics. They both see the economic life as something that contributes to social solidarity, not something that is separate. So, but anyway, in the case of the Kasab text, I mean, all the Kasab text, I mean, the early Kasab text, or what we call it like proto Islamic economic text, all those texts are based on the Quran, on the Hadith, and on the sayings of the companions, and on the practices, on the anecdotes of the first three generations, and then plus the juristic inferences as we can find in the fiqh of Muamalah.
Thank you. Mona, can you continue reading the next question, please?
Yeah, the next question is to Dr. Stivan. It is about Ibn al-Mukhaf and his practical merging between Sassanid and Islamic styles. To what extent were the Sassanid political values assimilated into the Islamic values of Ibn al-Mukhaf?
Yes, Stivan, please.
Thank you. I'm just thinking on the reply. Well, I think they were everything which was not specifically religious. He and others mentioned to integrate it, or which were, but even religious ideas which were such that they could work in other religions as well. So they were trans-religious in that sense. They were integrated, and there is this neologism by Hudson, the Islamicate. So when something is related to Islamic civilization, but it's not Islamic, and it's interesting that one thing which we could label Islamicate in one generation becomes Islamic for the next generation, because it becomes fully integrated into at least some branches of Islam. And well, I think he played a huge role in even in the transmission of Greek philosophy into Islam through and Indian thought into Islam through Sasanian sources, and also what is interesting that all this happened first at the top of the society, at the elites of society, and he was so influential because he was conversant with those on power. And of course, those on power have the most means, means to make changes, to pay for translations. And they were, of course, mostly interested about practice and theories of power. So political theories and also things like rhetoric were immensely important for them as a political tool, and also the use of religion as a political tool. Coming back to Ibn al-Mukhaf's values, and it's interesting to compare him with Shaybani's quote that we just heard. That he's very Ibn al-Mukhaf is very much an elitist, and to one good summary of that is a reference to Dimna, the anti-hero jackal of the Kalila Vadimna, the first chapter of the Kalila Vadimna, who says that for a valuable man, something like this, is like an elephant. Only two places can fit him. One is in the wilderness, so basically to leave society, and the other is to be the mount for kings. So to be very close to the power in order to make changes or to guide society through the ruler, because that's Ibn al-Mukhaf's clear agenda. He is guiding society through the powerful. He's guiding the powerful who should guide society. Yeah. So this replies to the question, and yes, something which will be valid for all of us. There are huge advantages of online conferences, but there are also disadvantages. So we cannot continue this discussion, but we can. So if you would like to, I'm immensely happy to reply emails and to remain in contact, or to be in contact with anyone who is watching this.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan, as well as Eddie Seti. I mean, on behalf of, I guess, the organizer, I would like to extend my, gratitude to both of you. For the very learned, I guess, this, presentations and discussion as well. The session is coming to an end, and I would like. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Just I knew I was forgetting something, and it was a reaction to your thoughts, and I don't know whether it's appropriate or not, but I felt how much Ibn al-Mukhaf is alive when you were talking, because the way you talked and also the ideas, he would very much share them. So we are still talking to him, and he's still talking to us, as he would have expected, and it was a joy to hear that.
Well, I think that note is well taken, I guess, and a very important one, I guess, at the end of the session. Again, I would just like, on behalf of the organizers, to extend my gratitude to the learned speakers as well as the very disciplined audience. And I would like to tell this to Hami Bashir, who is sending, two questions. We will share with you the emails of the learned presenters, and then, as Esteban said, you can continue the conversation with him. We know, in this type of conferences, we are not going to talk during the break over a cup of tea or coffee, but thank you very much again, and I would like to hand over the microphone to the organizers, and now we finished on time. Yes. Yes.
I just want to say something. Okay, just about the question on the theological question of Kasab. Indeed, there's I think the only section in the Gita Akasa that kind of touches on the theological aspect of Kasab is a section section 8 is on that goes al-akhdhu bil asbabi la yunafi at-tawakkul, meaning to follow the causes, to take the causes of earning a livelihood, to take steps and to take the means and go to the causes and effects in earning a livelihood. That does not negate tawakkul. So then there is a illusion to the debate of asbab and so on. So I think, but otherwise, it's mostly the ethical and pragmatic aspect of kasab. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that note, I guess, as well. And I would like again to thank you all and transfer the microphone to the organizers as well.